Hi, and welcome to ACT Test Tips and Tricks. My name is Ellen Collins, and I am a librarian at the West Branch of the Kansas City, Kansas Public Library. And today we're going to talk about different things you can do to maximize your time and improve your score on the ACT exam. Let's get started. Okay, so first off, you have a very limited amount of time for each question. It averages out to about 3 minutes for each 5 questions. So in English, you have 36 seconds per question. In the math section, you have 1 minute per question. And reading and science, you have 52 seconds per question. So it goes by pretty fast. So what I recommend doing is to wear a watch. You will not have access to your phone or a smartwatch. So it's a good idea to just go to the drugstore and buy like a cheap little stopwatch or digital watch with a clock on it. Either one will work. And then you'll probably want to get to, when you do take the actual exam, you'll want to get to the exam room a little bit early. So you have plenty of time to, you know, be in a comfortable spot and sit somewhere where you can see the wall clock if there is one. But, if you're not in a good location for that, or if there isn't a wall clock, you're really going to want to have a little watch on your wrist to take a peek at. Okay, so the next is to not spend time on things you don't know or understand. Answer what you do know first. So you've probably been taught throughout your entire life, in school and in general, to do things in order and not skip around. Well, you need to forget that now. For this test and most college entrance exams, it's actually going to benefit you to skip around and not go in order. So you're not going to want to spend time on things that you probably won't end up answering or that you'll really struggle on. You're going to want to prioritize the things that you know and that you understand. Okay, if you have spent 2 minutes on a question and aren't almost done, move on. Some of the questions you're going to answer right away, and others you'll need several minutes. So, the time that you have, I guess, extra for when you answer things really quickly and don't need the full, amount of seconds that you have allotted, then you can use that to solve some more difficult problems. So just make sure and prioritize your time. Next is answer sheet strategy. Don't leave the answer sheet empty to fill in at the end. Some people do that and it works out, but that's only if you know you're going to have extra time. And on the next slide, we're going to talk about a method that will help with bubble sheet strategy. As far as moving from the test booklet to your answer sheet, there's a way to do that that will save you time and minimize mistakes that you might make. Okay, and then finally, you're going to want to practice something called now, later, or never. Now is when you look at a question, it looks familiar, you understand the terminology, you understand the question, you see the multiple choice answers, and they look familiar to you. You know you can do it, so do it now. Later, well, you see a question and you think you know it, but it's going to take you a little bit to solve and work out. So, it might take you a minute or two. So what you want to do is come back to that later. And then finally, never. You look at the question and you see that it's a topic you're bad at or really don't recognize. You don't understand some of the words in the question. It doesn't make sense to you. Don't waste your time on that. You're going to want to guess and fill in just any answer for that one. And we'll talk about a little strategy for the ones that you guess on after this. And this is kind of an illustration. You'll see that this is a sample workbook for the ACT exam. Some of these I have X'd out. That means you've answered them. You don't have to look at it again. The ones that are circled, I circled them real big because you're going to want to flip through your book, when you answer all the questions. And any ones with a circle, you're going to want to go back and work on after you've done the ones that you know that you are confident that you answered correctly. And then finally, this big one in the middle with the X on it, Whoops, I clicked too quickly. Well, that one I X through the entire question because that's a never. I don't know it and I'm not going to learn it and I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to guess. Okay. So you definitely want to answer every question. There is no penalty for an incorrect answer on the ACT exam. So it's better to guess than to not answer at all. Another strategy is if it's multiple choice, you can cross out the answers that you know are wrong, and that'll leave you with less to choose from that are right. But so basically, you're not going to get negatives for answering something wrong. They only add up your score out of the ones you get correctly. So if you guess, that's way better than just leaving an answer blank. Okay, so mark the questions that you skip in your answer booklet by circling the number in your test booklet, or circling the entire problem, or starring it, or whatever method works for you. Just something really big so that you know that that's one of those later questions that you're going to come back to after you've gone through and answered everything that you know right away. And again, it is really hard to skip around. It feels counterintuitive, it feels wrong, but if you want to use your time wisely, then you'll go through and just answer stuff. And, if you spent 30 seconds on a question and you feel like it's going to take you a while more to figure out, just move on. Go through, get all the ones that you know, and then go through and get ones that, you need a little more time on. And then the ones that you know you don't know, again, just guess on those. So here's the answer sheet strategy I talked about on the last slide. If you're worried about accidentally filling in the wrong bubble on your answer sheet, try this. Work on a page at a time for English and math and a passage at a time for reading and science. Circle the answer correctly in your book, and then once you get to the end of a page or before you're going to flip your page over in your test booklet, transfer those answers to your answer sheet all at once. In grading tests, I find that lots of people miss ones that they circled right in their workbook because they bubbled in the wrong answer on their answer sheet. And that's usually because they wait till the end and they run out of time, or they're doing it one by one. They're figuring out the answer that they want to submit, and then they're moving over to their answer sheet and filling in that answer. So they're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Well, that leaves a lot of room for error. That makes it easier to lose your place. So if you do a bunch at once, so maybe in your answer booklet, an entire page, or you see on your bubble sheet that there's a column and that column is 1 through 7, well, then you might want to go through and answer 1 through 7 in your workbook and then fill in your bubble sheet 1 through 7 all at once. So that way you aren't going back and forth or waiting till the end. And a lot of times, if you've taken it and you've practiced and you know that you're going to have extra time, it's okay to wait till the end to fill out your bubble sheet, but then you're going to be having to flip through your book all over again, your question booklet. So there's definitely a strategy for, your answers that will help you save time and eliminate some of that skipping around. And then finally, letter of the day. So what this means is on answers that you guess on, you always pick the same answer. So you always choose A or F in the first column, or you always choose the last column. You just go down in a line on the ones you guess on. If you are guessing on one and you just fill in a random bubble, that's fine. But if you're consistent, you are more likely to pick up points. So if you're guessing on a question and you always fill in A on those guesses, statistically, you're more likely to get some of those guesses right, get them correct. Okay, and then next you want to know the directions. Know the test format ahead of time, know how many questions are in each section. The English test has 75 questions. The math test has 60 questions. The reading test has 40 questions. And the science test has 40 questions as well. The writing test, it's a 40-minute essay test, at the end that measures your writing skills, and it's one writing prompt that will describe an issue and present different perspectives on that issue, and then you have to write about that. And that's a paper and pencil test. There's no bubble sheet you fill in. You have to actually write. So you just really want to make sure and read their directions for each section carefully prior to starting. English, reading, and science ask for the best answer that you can choose or think of or see out of the multiple choice. Math asks for the correct answer. So, don't guess on those math ones. You'll want to solve that and work that out. And then look at all the multiple choice options before selecting an answer. Now, this is kind of a good and bad strategy. If you know something and you immediately are looking for that answer in the multiple choice, then you're going to go with that. What I don't want you to do is be guessing yourself and then look through the multiple choice answers when you think you know the right one and then second guess yourself and get bogged down and questioning that and, thinking that, oh, maybe I wasn't right. You want to go with your gut, go with what feels right, go with your first answer, when you're reading through the multiple choice options. Although sometimes you just look at an option and okay, I was going to answer this, but this is actually the correct one. That's right, I remember, this is correct. I'm going to circle that one. So definitely look at all your options, but don't get bogged down in second guessing yourself, because that usually leads to incorrect answers. Okay, so here's an example of the types of math and science questions on the ACT. So for instance, in the math area, you have questions on pre-algebra, elementary algebra, intermediate algebra, coordinate geometry, plane geometry, and trigonometry. And then you'll see here on the right side of the graph the number of questions that are that type of math area. So for instance, you see at the bottom trigonometry, that only has 4 questions. So here's where strategy comes into play again. If you do not know trigonometry, or you've learned it in school but you're terrible at it, you don't think you can do it, it's not your strong area, but you're really good at pre-algebra, maybe you just want to focus spending your time on the stuff that you do know. And don't worry about getting to the end, just spend time on the sections that you feel comfortable doing. And then you'll see in the science section, there's 3 different types of questions, and you'll see that, the conflicting viewpoints, there's a smaller number of questions, it's less than a third. So depending on what your strong skill set is, you may spend more time on certain types of questions rather than, trying to learn stuff that you don't feel quite comfortable with before you take the test. So it really does help to know the format of the ACT and, what kind of questions are going to be asked and what you're going to be expected to know. And then finally, at the end, you're going to want to leave a little bit of time, if you can, to review your work. Now, this is only if you've finished and you have extra time, though. Like, if you're cutting it down to the wire, don't worry about going back. But if you have finished early, do not just sit there. Go back and work on any questions that you skipped, or anything that you circled real big that was one of those laters that you wanted to go back over and review and spend a little bit more time on. Also, if you have extra time, you can make sure your answers and the answers in your work booklet and the answers on your bubble sheet match up. Because again, when I'm grading them, I find, people have circled the correct thing in their work booklet, but they were rushing and moving back and forth, and they answered it wrong on their they bubbled it in wrong on their answer sheet. So if you have that extra time, you can use it to review your work just a little bit. Okay, the next thing is that the library offers you study tools to help with college entrance exams. The great thing about these is that they are free with your library card and you can use them from home. You don't have to come in the library during our hours um, and be running around and try to get in here at a certain time. You could do this at midnight if you want. Any day of the week, early in the morning, right after school, whatever works for you, which is really cool. All you have to do is have a Kansas City, Kansas Public Library card and you're good to go. So one of them we have is Learning Express Library. The other is Tutor.com. Both of these databases have tools to help you with college test prep. And we're just going to exit out of this presentation real quick because I'm going to show you what that looks like actually. Okay, so when you go to our webpage, you're going to go to kckpl.org and then you will go down here to the eCommunity tab and click on that. And then right here, right in front of your face up at the top, it's real great, easy to find, databases alphabetically. Click on that. So I'm going to show you Learning Express Library. So we'll go to L, and then it's right at the top of the L's, Learning Express Library. So you will have to register. Again, it's free. I believe it requires an email, but it's real quick. I've already registered, so I'm going to go ahead and sign in. My email and then my password. Okay, so you'll see everything you do on this, it keeps track of in your center. It shows you if you've taken a practice test or if you've worked on tutorials and what your progress is on those. So I have done a computer course and I haven't finished it, but it's in progress. So you can click back on this and it'll take you right back to where you started. This does this for the tests. So if you're in the middle of a practice test or a tutorial and you have to stop for the evening, it'll be right here in your center. But I'm going to show you what it actually looks like. So there's a whole section here, College Admissions Test Preparation. You can prepare for AP tests, the ACT, and the SAT in this section. Just click on it. And we're going into the ACT. So you'll see they have tutorials. They have practice tests for each section, and then you can do the complete simulated practice test. And I really, really recommend doing this prior to taking the test in person because the first time people take it, sometimes time can really get away with them. It goes by really fast. Even though you're in the room for a few hours, when you're taking the actual test, it goes by really fast. So this will help you figure out how to manage your time, how long you're taking, if you've misjudged it and you're taking way longer than you need to, and if you need to move faster, or if you're good and you have extra time and you can spend more time on each question. But so we're just going to do, okay, this is the complete practice test 1. You start the test. And the cool thing about this is that it gives you the instructions like you were doing it on the real day. So you have 75 minutes for the English test, 60 for the practice, 40 each for the science and reading. That's exactly, you know what, I read off that wrong, I apologize. You have 75 total questions, but 45 minutes. So 45 minutes for the English test, a full hour for the math test, and then 35 minutes each for your reading and science. Okay, so let's say you're going to take a practice test. Those are the instructions, and this is what it looks like. So I'm going to read the passage. I'm going to select the answer. Let's say I'm not quite sure about this one. I'm going to flag it, and I can go back later at the end. So I'm going to skip that. Maybe I do want to answer it, but I'm, second guessing my answer. So I'm going to leave that flag on there. But basically, it's got the time right up here. You can jump around, go to the next screen when you're ready. And what's really nice is it's exactly like taking the test in real time. You're going to go through, it's got your clock, you'll have basically the layout of what you would in your physical work booklet, like when you're taking the test for real. So the reason I'm scrolling through is I want to show you what it looks like. So this is saying, okay, yeah, I got to the end, but I have more time. So you should go, it's telling you should go back and look at your work, double check your work, and work on it more. So basically that's what the practice test looks like. Tutor.com interface is a little bit different, but again, you're going to find that in the databases alphabetically on our web page. And here's tutor.com. And this is something you're going to register for. Again, you put your library card number in. It'll keep track of your progress. It'll keep track of if you've had an actual live meeting with a tutor or if you're just taking those practice tests, kind of like on the other database. So we're going to move back to our presentation here, and I'm going to go over when I have done this workshop in person. I have gotten some different questions from people. Sorry, I've got to run through this again. Okay, I've gotten some questions from people in the class that I have had time to research and look up, so I'm going to share these with you in case you have the same questions. So the first question I got from several people was, do colleges take your best score if you take the test multiple times? In general, it is recommended that you take the ACT 2 to 3 times to get your best score, regardless of whether the schools you're applying to use something called super scoring or highest sitting to determine your best score. However, you don't want to just take the ACT a bunch of times. You could take the practice tests in person or online as much as you want, but don't take the test a whole bunch of times. It can actually hurt your college applications, so just do it a few times. Maybe do a bunch of practice tests for a couple months or one a month, and then go in and sit for the test. And if you're not happy with your score, and if you have more time before you have to send that into the college you're applying to, then sign up for another one and, create a study plan and sit and study for that on a regular basis. You may be able to boost your score a little bit. And then I've had a lot of questions on how it's actually scored. So what are raw, scaled, and composite scores? A raw score is the total number you score correct in each section. And remember when I said you didn't get penalized for answering incorrectly, like they don't subtract any from your total if you've answered something wrong. This is just like you literally go down and, okay, you got number 1 right, you got number 2 right, you got number 3 right, you got number 5 right. That's how they score your answer. So your raw score is a total number you score correct in each section. And then a scaled score, it's converted from your raw score. Scaling will analyze average scores for each version of the ACT to ensure that no test date is easier or harder than another. So some people take the test on multiple occasions. They're taking a different test each time. It's going to look a little bit different. And, all over the country, people are taking these tests on different dates and different locations. They're not all taking the exact same test every single time. So what that scale score is your raw score is converted to a scale score so that it's fair, and everybody who's taking the test at different dates and different locations is going to get a scaled score, and that makes it sure that no test date or version is easier or harder. So I know that sounds kind of complicated, but it does make sense. And then finally, your composite score. A composite score is the average of your 4 scores in each area rounded up to the nearest whole number. So let's say you got a 12 in math and a 17 in English and a 22 in reading and an 18 in science. Your composite score is just an average of those. And then let's say when you average those, it averages like to, 18.5. you're going to round up to 19. So then your final composite score will be 19. And again, that's just a quick example, but so there is actually strategy for how much you need to study. That's this next question. How much do I need to study? The kind of basic guidelines are, if you want to raise your ACT score just 1 point, you want to study for 10 hours, additional hours. If you want to raise it 1 to 2 points, an additional 20 hours. If you want to raise it 2 to 4 points, an additional 40 hours. If you want to increase your ACT score 6 to 9 points overall, that's 150 plus hours that you probably should study. So I'm going to give you an example of that. Let's say that student A's ACT score initially is 28, but they scored a 24 on the practice, or sorry, let's say student A's goal is a 28, but they scored a 24 on their practice test, and they really want that 28. So that means they need to improve by 4 points. So based on the estimate of point increases to study hours, student A needs to put in around 40 hours of study time. Now there are different ways they could do that. They could do a light schedule, a moderate schedule, or a heavy schedule. This will depend on how many points you want to increase and how far away your next test is. So let's say you have like barely any time, you're going to go sit for your test in 2 weeks, then you're going to do 20 hours a week for 2 weeks, and that'll be your 40 hours. But let's say your next test is 12 weeks away. So you could do a light schedule. You could do 4 hours a week for 10 weeks. That's that same 40 hours. It's just spread out a little bit more. Okay, and then the last question I've gotten from people is, should I take the ACT or the SAT? Well, you always want to check with the colleges you are applying to and find out if they have a preference. If they don't, then you should take the ACT and the SAT practice test and compare your scores. And if you score much higher on one test than another, then it's smart to study for that one that you did better on. It's easier to study for a test that you're already kind of familiar with. So if your school requires either the ACT or the SAT, you'll kind of want to just stick to the one that's required and spend time on that rather than, seeing what you're better at. So there definitely is strategy with that. And also in the past, it's been traditionally schools on the West and East Coast and Ivy League schools and things like that have they've preferred to see an SAT score, and then schools in the Midwest have preferred to see an ACT score. But that's not necessarily true anymore. So it's really important that you check with the institution you are going to apply to, call their admissions office, say, I haven't taken my standardized entrance exams yet. Does this school prefer taking the ACT or the SAT? And they'll let you know. And again, if they don't have a preference, then practice taking them both and see what you excel at, because they are a little bit different. So this just shows some of the difference. Like on the ACT exam, no math formulas are provided, but you will be able to use a calculator on all of it. On the SAT, there's a section where you can't use a calculator. You see on both of these, it's the same. There's no penalty for guessing. The big difference between the SAT and the ACT is the format, and then what they actually test for. So the ACT exam tests for what you have learned in high school. However, the SAT exam tests for what you've learned in high school and what skills you need to succeed in college, what learning skills. So that is a big difference. But I mean, they're a lot similar as far as, how many hours it takes to take the test, how many questions, the structure. There is no science question on the SAT exam. So that could play into your decision, but probably not. It's best to practice taking both if your desired college doesn't have a preference, and seeing what you're best at. I mean, there's a lot of factors that are going to go into which you choose, but really the first thing you should do is contact your desired college that you're applying to and just see what they say. Okay, so finally, this presentation is finished. If you have any questions or if you want any help, just call me or email me. So if you'd like a copy of my PowerPoint, if you'd like me to email you some of the study sheets for the different sections, like math or English or science or reading or all of them, we can also schedule some one-on-one time for strategy prep, or I can sit and help you register on and use those databases for the practice tests until you get comfortable. You can also sign up for the practice tests on the Kansas City, Kansas Public Library. The next date has actually been postponed because of all that's going on right now and the library not being open, but that's why it's really cool that we have the Learning Express Library and the Tutor.com databases. You could take a practice test from home and not have to miss out on that just because the library is closed right now. So, but if you need any help, please get a hold of me. Email's probably the quickest, but I will answer my voicemail as well every time, all the time. So just email me, ecollins@kckpl.org, or my phone number here at West. It's 913-295-8250, and then my personal extension is 5103. So thank you for sitting through this with me. I hope to see some of you guys at our practice tests in the future in person. But in the meantime, if I can help you online, just let me know. And thank you. I appreciate your time.